One of the things that has made it challenging for all walks of life is actually coming together for the events that we love to do. And that was one of a core competency that Squash and Fire has done, especially for the DC area, is bringing major events, both from the world stage and national stage, to DC. And we've had the background of hosting the nationals, the world team champs, where you took the torch.
Yeah, the World Team Champs was a bit of a baptism by fire for me, but it was a great event. Yeah.
But now you have some PSA events coming on, and just this past July, you hosted a 20K for the men and women, which is great that you're showcasing both men and women at the same time. I think it just really highlights the sport in such a great way. But you have an event coming up again with the 50K level. So how have the PSA events been received by the community?
Really excited to have professional squash in DC, and you already mentioned the men's world teams, which was kind of the first time that Squash and Fire in our DC community had really high level squash. And I think on the back of that, we were very eager to keep the sort of chain of communication open with the PSA team and see what the possibilities were. The pandemic somewhat got in the way of that, but we were able to sort of put together something last summer that you just referenced with our 20K event, which was our first Squash and Fire Open, which actually ended up being the first international tournament in the US post-pandemic, which was really exciting. We had people coming in from different places around the world, and a lot of them then went on to Chicago a week or two later to play the World Championships last summer, and was extremely well received by the local community, both in terms of having some local companies come in and sponsor the event, but also just the people coming to buy tickets and watch and support the players and get invested and involved in the matches. And you do have to remember that a lot of people at Squash and Fire, this is the only place they've ever had exposure to squash at.
Yeah.
So it's sort of another interesting challenge to try and sell the wider picture of squash and like what's the Pro Tour about and like who are these players. And when you're invested in the game like the two of us are, like like who these names are and how great it is to have them, but trying to explain like what a big deal it is to have these players coming to Squash and Fire is actually a really interesting thing because they just haven't had previous exposure to it. So as you just referenced, coming up February 16th to 20th, we have a World Tour event now. So a 50K bronze event, both men and women. I don't think we would ever do anything without it being a co-ed event. I think that wouldn't really fit with the Squash and Fire model to sort of showcase one over the other. So having them a joint event is really important to us to do. And the level of field that we have coming in a few weeks is really spectacular. And obviously it's a lot of work to put on an event like that, but the engagement and interest and enthusiasm from our community last summer was amazing. And I only think it's going to be increased for what we have coming up in a few weeks time. And we're really pumped to get the show on the road and have the guys and girls here playing some great squash.
So speaking of which, I was really impressed with the caliber of players we have signed up, and was going to spend a little bit of time quickly talking about some players to watch. So
yeah,
I mean, we'll start off with the women. To have the world number one coming to any event, it's remarkable, right?
yeah. I mean, I was obviously following the entry list pretty closely, like as we were leading up to the deadline a couple of weeks ago. And when I saw Noah El Shabini on there, I was like, how is this happening? Like, this is so cool. And I think we've somewhat benefited from normally Noah would play in New York at the TOC and then probably next be back on tour for the Windy City Open. And with TOC being pushed back until the spring, kind of created a longer gap in the schedule than normally would be around this time of year. So our timing works well, and that Chicago follows with the Windy City Open the next week. And I think, that provides a good opportunity for players like Noah to get back on the tour and get back into competitive action. And we're so excited that she's chosen to play at Squash and Fire, and, really looking forward to having her leading the women's field next month.
And it's one of those things I think we kind of take for granted because she has been world number one for so long, that she's won. I'm going off the top of my head, so I may get this wrong, but I think it's 5 world championships.
That's what I've been writing down. So I think you're right. Yeah,
Oh, is that
5-time world champion. Yeah,
Thank you.
I definitely checked it. I think.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
And she's still so young. Like,
Yeah. I know.
it's just seen a career in the making. Well, and some other notes here is just highlighting some Americans that are playing.
Yep.
Olivia Fichter and Sabrina Sobi both will be making another appearance. And for context, for those who might not be as familiar, for the first time in history in the United States, we've had 4 US players in the top 20 on the women's side, which is just really remarkable, and we're having a great high caliber women coming there, which actually on paper puts the Americans number 2 from a team perspective behind Egypt. So
Yeah, that is, I mean, honestly, that is just, it's so cool for squash in America. Like the fact that Olivia and Sabrina are alongside Amanda and Olivia number two, like that's just amazing that there's four women are playing this caliber squash in the US. And I think it's so inspirational for especially junior girls to see these ladies playing. But I mean, I think all of them have the potential to go even further than they are now, which I think we're all as fans of squash in America like really excited to see. And as you just referenced, Olivia and Sabrina will be here at Squash and Fire, and they were both with us last summer, and a lot of people here really enjoyed watching them play. They both made the semis of our challenger event last summer, so hopefully one of them or both of them can have a really good run, and they'll definitely get a lot of support from the DC crowd, which is great.
well, speaking of DC crowd, there's also Squash and Fire has been a great training ground for multiple reasons because of the glass court, the community, the head coach Ronnie. But there are also some people who've come back through. So who are some of the other fan favorites who have come through before that pay attention to?
Yeah, well, I think our sort of number one fan favorite, who this is going to be his third visit to Squash and Fire, is James Willstrop. He was here in 2019 for the men's world teams, and England finished second behind Egypt. And then he was our top seed last year for the inaugural Squash and Fire Open, as we just referenced, the Challenger 20K, and he made the final and lost very good match to Victor Crouin from France, who's currently sort of lighting it up for Harvard this season. But James, who knows? But I think we'd probably all expect him to be getting towards the sort of tail end of his career, and the fact that his game style and the way he plays, it's pretty special and unique. And for Squash and Fire and DC fans too, this is going to be the third time that James has played here, is pretty cool given how new we are to the scene. And he definitely has attracted like a good following from people here. And I know in the lead up to the tournament, everybody's like asking me like, is James going to enter? Is James coming?
Oh, great.
And
Yeah.
James and I were exchanged some WhatsApps before he was on the entry list. And I was like, no pressure, James. Everyone in DC wants to see
Yeah.
you back.
Yeah.
So very excited that he's returning. And he's definitely got a little bit of a local following here, which is really cool. And so excited to see him back on court. And then I think on the women's side, the Gillis sisters, both Nella and Tina, like Nella won the Squash and Fire Open last year, but they have a big connection to Squash and Fire through Ronnie. They're both the sisters from Belgium, as is Ronnie, and he had a big part of their development as squash players, and I think also as individuals, like when they were growing up in Belgium, and still, especially with Tina, but also to some extent with Nella too, involved in their progression as they've got to the level they have on the tour now, and they've both been in the top 20. I think at the moment Nella's at 14 and Tina's just outside that 23. She had a couple of injuries latterly, but they're both on the entry list. They could play in the second round.
Oh, is that right?
So if Tina wins her first match, we could have a Gillis sisters battle, which I know they've played once in the British Open, I think, but they haven't had that many meetings on the tour. So that would be very interesting to see. They've both, especially Tina, have spent some time sort of training here when they've been in the US at other times. So the Squash and Fire community's got to know both of them pretty well. So if we do end up having an all sister battle, that's going to be very eagerly anticipated. So let's see what happens.
I like it. Well, going over quickly to the men's side, you talked about James Willstrop, who really, I mean, he's a legend in the game. And if for those who don't know this, he's also an actor and a writer. So he's written, I think this is his third book, and he writes columns. So he's a pretty dynamic character off court as well with the written word. So, but you have Muhammad El Shabagi, again, hard to discount, a former world number one. And he actually just got back to the number one ranking this past July in Chicago. So really interesting player there. But who else in the field kind of stands out for you?
I
Were you
think,
excited to see?
no, well, and I think this also goes to, so Joel Macon is the second seed from Wales, current world number 8, and he was also here back in 2019 for the Welsh team in the playing in men's world team championship, and they ended up playing Egypt in the semis, and his match was against Tarek Momen, which he won 3-2, came back from some big deficit in the fifth, and Joel Macon's effort levels crazy dives around the court, just doesn't give up on a single ball. Like, very inspiring to see. And I think of the matches from that event, that's the one that people still talk about and
So
remember. Like, I
yeah.
think, yeah, that was like the one that really stands out. And so certainly seeing Joel, in the draw and coming back to DC, he definitely got himself a good reputation here for his incredible effort levels then. And I mean, I guess since 2019, he's only got better. And we're really excited to have him back. And I'm sure he's going to be he's a big threat to win the tournament, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, his physicality on court, and it's all of these athletes on both sides, of men and women, is just they're just phenomenal athletes. But so to then say Joel and almost akin to Paul Cole, who are just phenomenal, like trained like madmen. It's like
Yeah.
unbelievable to have that distinction, and he's very exciting to watch. So definitely look out for that. A little bit, we do also have some American flavor with
Yep.
Shahidjan Khan and Todd Harrity, who are both ranked. They're in this grouping. They're both 34 and 35 in the world right now,
Yep.
which is world rankings highs for them. So again, that'll be really exciting to support them.
They'll both be opening day action on the glass. Excited to get behind them. Todd played on the US team 2.5 years ago, and then Shahjan was here back in the summer for the Squash and Fire Open. So there's they've both played here before, and we're really excited to see them on the court. And they'll also, just like with Olivia and Sabrina, have the home crowd behind them. So fingers crossed they can make some waves.
Well, that's exciting, and one of the things going on, which I love that the DC community is embracing this, and you guys are helping to lead it,